It's time already, so we should get started. Let's switch to the camera. Hi there, and welcome to the Untitled WebDev stream. My name is Lucas, and after 3 episodes, I think it is. Yeah, 3 episodes. This is the 4th one. Today we will be starting with JavaScript. The first one, as you might know, was about the tooling you need in order to actually start with web development. Those are the code editor and the browser. The second one was focused on HTML, one of the 3 pillars of the web development, basically. The third episode was focused on CSS, and this one will be focused in JavaScript. Because JavaScript is the most complex of the 3 pillars, this might be the only one or the first one to be separated into several streams. So this first one will be focused mainly on the general syntax and how to do some stuff with JavaScript, but the following one will be more in depth, mixing it with HTML and CSS and how it interacts with the website you are creating or the web app you are creating. And from then on, we will start seeing other tooling that is related to web development, like for example, software for source control like Git, or package managers like npm or pnpm or yarn or other stuff like that. But for now, let's just focus on JavaScript first, and then let's start from there. So let's switch to the desktop again. So this is pretty much where we left off, basically. So this is the website we created with HTML and CSS, and the code behind it is pretty much this one. One thing I think I never show you with the code editor is that in the previous 2 episodes, I opened this HTML5 and this CSS file. I created the CSS file from scratch, but yeah, I had these 2 tabs open. But VSCode has an option that you can you have in either Mac, Windows, and Linux, to open directly a folder. So instead of opening a file like you will do with any text editor, you can open a folder. And in my case, I opened this HTML folder I have in here that has all the things that we did so far. And once you open that folder, you will see this sidebar in here that I just hidden away, but you can toggle it by clicking in here or doing Control B or Command B if you are on Mac. But this opens this bar, that's why it's the Control or Command B, this bar, and this has all the files that are in the directory you open or the folder you opened. So in my case, I have in here the HTML file, hello HTML, this is the one, and hello CSS. You can then, for example, if you want to focus just in one, let's say in hello HTML, and you don't want to have the clutter up here, you can just go ahead and close it because you still have it in here. And if this is annoying, again, you can toggle it out in order to just focus on the code, okay? But I didn't show you this, but yeah, it's kind of useful. In here, I also have the logo SVG that we are using in here in the middle of the site, and this background that we never use. So we could, for example, delete it by just doing context menu. So that's the right click and then delete, and we got rid of something we are not using. So you might be thinking that because this episode will be focused on JavaScript, we should just go ahead and create if we have hello HTML and hello CSS, then the next one will be hello JS or something like that, or hello.javascript or something like that. But the thing is, I want to first show you mainly the syntax of the language. Syntax meaning the way you write stuff. For example, in HTML, the syntax is this lower than symbol followed by a word and a bigger than, and then you have the attributes and whatnot. So that's the syntax, the way you write stuff. In CSS, we have the selectors, so meaning the thing that we want to apply the styles to. This opening and closing bracket, and then we have the properties that we want to affect. So that's the syntax for CSS. So what I want to show you first is mainly some stuff about the syntax of JavaScript and how to, like right now, can go to your browser and start playing with it. And once we get kind of familiar with the language, then we will start trying to integrate JavaScript into our web app or our website. We might have to think about something else besides this, because basically this website doesn't need like JavaScript at all. It's just like a title, an image, and some links, so maybe doesn't need JavaScript. You might think like, well, how you figure that out? How you figure out that you need JavaScript or you don't need JavaScript? Basically, on a website that is this simple, that don't need any kind of interactions from the user or doesn't have any kind of like behaviors, as I explained on previous episodes, so something that the website does, then this is pretty much like super fine. It's just links and an image, so it's okay. But if you want to add some behaviors or like give life to your website in order to transform it into a web app, so like an application on the web, basically, that needs JavaScript, basically. That's just like the way JavaScript was born. I generally don't go into like the history lesson, because I generally feel like it's kind of boring and you can just go ahead and Google it and you will find it in Wikipedia or something like that. But basically, JavaScript was born in 1995, and that it was born basically because developers wanted to have more control over the websites they created. So originally, all websites were just like HTML, and they didn't have CSS first. Then CSS was born, and it was like it helped to style the website and give them like more control over the visuals of the website. But the thing is, they didn't have any kind of control over the way the website behaved. So for example, stuff like messaging apps weren't possible on the browser directly. So for example, Facebook Messenger wasn't possible. Stuff like Twitter wasn't possible at all. So JavaScript enables that, enables a way of creating applications on the web, basically. So I went back to the browser in here, and as you can see, we have again title, image, and whatever. But the focus today will be only on our right side in here on the developer tools, basically. Let me know if it's small. Maybe it's small. I can make it a little bit bigger, maybe there. I think it's kind of okay. So what we were using today is not the element inspection. So I told you, like I think in the first or second episode, that for the first episodes we will be focusing on this tab, so we have this elements tab, and we are focusing on here because in here we have control over HTML and CSS. But in order to show you JavaScript, we need to go to another view. So in here you can see a lot of stuff. We will be covering this in the following episodes, but we have, for example, console, source, network, performance, memory, application, and so on and so forth. You might not have the same order of tabs because you can change the order of these ones. So for example, let's say I want to have, I don't know, this network one first even. You can drag it out. You can grab it there, okay? I can click on elements and I can grab it first again, okay? So the one we will be seeing today is the one that is called console. You can either click on here and it will show you this view that it looks super empty, but we will fill it out soon enough. Or you can, in either view, if you are, for example, in elements or in network or in any other view, if you press the escape key, something will pop up in here in the bottom. We can resize it, like dragging the border. And in here you have a console always available. So for example, if you are checking out some HTML and you want to open the console, you can go in here, or more faster, you can just press escape and this will open just in the bottom, okay? So let's go to the console view for now, just because we want to have some kind of like a full screen view of the code in order to like actually take a look at it, okay? Make it a little bit bigger even, because we have a lot of empty space in here to use. So JavaScript, Of the three languages I showed so far, like CSS, HTML, and now JavaScript, JavaScript is the more complex one, let's say, because HTML is just a language to create like the mock-up of your website, like I said before, like the skeleton of your website. And if you think about it, like in the human body, even like the same example, the skeleton doesn't do anything by itself. It's just like a basic structure where everything is mounted, right? With everything hangs on, basically. CSS is just the visuals. So that's, for example, let's say the color of your skin, or the color of your hair, or the size of, I don't know, your eyes, or something like that, let's say. So that will be like CSS. So it's just visual. It doesn't have any kind of like behavior by itself. JavaScript will be like pretty much like the entire nervous system, like the brain of your website. So that's the most complex part of human body, and it's also the most complex part of your website or your web app. If you have any previous experience with other languages, like other programming languages, this is kind of similar. The syntax is pretty similar to like the earlier versions of Java. That's why it's called JavaScript. Or similar to like even C or C++. But you have to have in mind that even if it's called like JavaScript, there is like a common joke that tells it's basically like Java and JavaScript are as similar as Alf and Gandalf, because they're like just similar in name. They are not actually anything more like that. So it's just the name, okay? So because I want to like show you, like, even if you don't have any kind of experience at all in web programming, or like in programming in general, I will show you some stuff that might be like super obvious if you have experience in other programming language. But bear with it, because like in this same episode you might see something that is not similar to your previous experience. And if you don't have any experience at all, just like as I always say, just interact with me in the chat and say like, why is that, or how you write that, or whatever, and I can go ahead and try to figure out with you. So for now, for starters, let's do something that will be pretty familiar for anyone, even if you don't have any kind of like programming experience at all, and that's just like math. And before I go into that, I want to switch 1 second to the main camera and go to like the for reals view. So I will show you as the first example, and some of the first examples, I will show you some math, but like a basic math, like 2 + 2 and stuff like that. But that doesn't mean, and will never mean, that programming requires you to know anything about math. I personally, like myself, I suck at math. Like in the school, I suck at mathematics, and I never like it at all. And I love programming. Programming is more about expressing like logic and expressing like intent and behaviors and stuff like that. It's like closest to like, for example, like studying plain English or Spanish, or like just studying logic. It's not about mathematics itself. Every time you need some complex, like super intricate mathematic formula, you just go ahead and Google it and use it. Like, for example, I don't know, if you need the formula for gravity if you are creating a game, just go ahead and Google the formula for gravity. You don't need to know it by memory. So don't worry, I will show you examples with math, but that doesn't mean that you require to know everything about math in order to be a programmer. I hate it myself. I will not put you through that. So let's switch again to the desktop, and the first example, as I mentioned, will be math, but it's not like we will be always talking about math, okay? So let's do what I just said. If you want to do just like an add like of 2 numbers, let's say, for example, an addition of 2 numbers. So for example, 2 + 2, just write 2 + 2. Let's make it a little bit like a lot bigger. So yeah, that's awesome. So let's say, for example, 2 + 2, right? We are already seeing the result just below that, because the console that comes with the developer tools already is evaluating this, meaning that it's taking this operation and it's giving us the result. But to actually get the result, we need to press enter. So this is pretty much behaving exactly the same as the calculator that comes with with your operating system. Like, I don't know how the Ubuntu one looks like because I almost never use it, but let's say like calculator here. So I have this calculator, and if I press like 2 plus 2 and I do like enter, I get the result, right? So it's like pretty much the same. 2 plus 2, enter, and I get 4. So it's just math, okay? I can do any kind of operations in here. I can do like 2 times 4, for example. So now I use the same symbols that we use in the calculator on your operating system. So the asterisk is like times 4, for example. So in here we get 8. You also can use parentheses. So for example, if you want to do like 2 plus 2, I don't know, like 8, for example, then we can use parentheses in order to separate the terms of the math operation or whatever. So this is like pretty much is just like using the calculator of your operating system, right? So it's just math operations. This in JavaScript, they use some terminology for this. You don't have to. You can just say like this is just an operation. This will be an expression in JavaScript, a number expression basically, but you can just say like a math operation in JavaScript, and that will be fine because it's like super clear, like what are you talking about. So one thing that is pretty common in math, and we will use it in programming but not in the like math-wise, we will use it for other stuff, but one thing that is pretty popular in math is to have what is called variables, or like when you, for example, have an equation and you have the x or something like that, it's like super popular to have that. So in order to achieve that in here, we can do something like, for example, let's say x, and if we want to save a value in that x, like say x equals something, we just say like x equals 10, yeah. So now x equals 10, meaning that I can do, for example, x plus 20, and now we get 30 because x equals 10, so if we add 20, we get 30. I know this is super math related, but like bear with me, this will get fun, like more fun with time. So this thing that I did in here, like the x equals something, is what's called an assignation. Basically, we are assigning a value to x. So we are saying like x equals 10. We can change the value later. For example, we can say like now x equals, let's say, and we can even do like an operation in here. So for example, 10 times 10. Right? It's super obvious the result, but whatever. So now x equals 10 plus 10. That means 100. So we can then do x, for example, plus 10, and we get 110, right? So this is basically like just we are saving this, like the output of this operation into this x. So now x always equals this, right? So in programming, the x is called a variable basically, so it's something that can change value over time and is saving a value, so that's a variable basically. The good thing about programming in general is that we don't have to do what mathematicians do and use just one letter in order to represent a value. We can, for example, say something like 100 and assign the value 100. So now we can use words in order to save our values. We don't have to use like a single letter that is super hard to memorize and know what the value is. So now, because it's called 100, I always know that 100 has the value of 100. So now I say, for example, 2 times 100 and I get 200. It's kind of obvious, but it's better than using 2 times x, okay? So yeah, Gonzalo Benofi is talking in the chat and he's saying that it's more like human language, and that's exactly the point. The idea is that programming languages are made to try to save some kind of behavior into the computer. So the computer needs to understand that and transform it into binary code or whatever. So it's a super complex process. But the thing is, like, you as a programmer, you are not a computer, you are like a human being, and you possibly in the future will be working with other human beings. So if you save a value with just a single letter, that for the computer will be exactly the same. So 100 like written like this, or saving it like an X, for the computer is exactly the same. But for us as humans, for you and your co-workers in the future, X is harder to figure it out than just saving it like 100 or something like that. So in that regard, we can do, for example, something like this. You could save something like X again, and I want to show you this in order to like go a little bit away from math. You can save what is called strings, so that's basically words. Okay, so a word like hello or something like that, you can save that into a variable as well. You are not limited to just save numbers. So again, we can have something like X, and in here put something like this. Look, okay? So that's like the username I use pretty much everywhere, or my nickname or whatever. So I use these quote marks in order to say that the word starts in here and it finishes in here. So if I remove this quote mark in here and I press enter, I get an error because it doesn't know when this the word is finishing. I need to say basically where it starts and when does it finish. Similar to when I show you in HTML that you have an opening tag and a closing tag. In here you need an opening quote mark and a closing quote mark. It's basically like when you are writing a Word document and you get like the correction that you forgot to close it. It's basically that. So X again, and it equals quote marks look. Okay, so if I press enter in this, I get look in here because the browser is basically telling me that it saved this value. Okay, let's say that. So now X equals look, but like, why X, right? It's super unintuitive. So a better variable name for this will be instead something like name. So we can do name look in here, and now if I do name, I get look. It's like more obvious for me, and it's more obvious for others when I show them the code. If somebody wants to change the name, for example, from Luke to Leo, for example, they can do that by just looking for the variable name named name. So for example, if I had to look for X, will be like super hard, and name is kind of easier. Okay, I show you that you can do something like, for example, 2 plus 2, and that gives you 4, right? You can also use this plus sign to do what is called concatenation in JavaScript. That means basically adding up words, and that's kind of confusing because it's not like if you do A plus B equals C or something like that, right? But I will show you because showing you code is kind of easier than just talking. So let's say I already saved a name variable that is called look, right? So I can do something like, for example, say hello space plus name, right? So it's like I'm adding up hello and the name I have saved, and that equals hello look, for example, right? So I'm adding up words, I'm joining them, I'm concatenating them or whatever. So basically it's like I'm joining two words into one single string. In programming, this stuff that is put into quote marks is basically called strings. Strings are a sequence of letters or symbols. So this could be like, I'm using American symbols or whatever, but you can use, for example, like Japanese, Chinese symbols. You can use emojis or whatever. So it's not like just this, it's just like a sequence of characters. Basically, for example, in a messaging app, like for example Messenger, WhatsApp, Telegram or whatever, if you send a message, you are basically sending something like this. So if you write hello look and press enter, something like this is being saved in a place in JavaScript. We will be seeing this like a lot later, but this is being saved and sent through JavaScript to the other end, so the other person receives this message basically. Okay, So we saw so far that we can do something like mathematical operations to like, and it could be as complex as you want, like this times 4. If you want to divide, you also can use the bar. This is the same as in mathematics. Okay, some symbols that might not come like in mind directly because those are from JavaScript that are not like in the calculator or anything like that is, for example, if you want to do I don't know, like I can't recall the name of the operation. Let's symbol. So let me Google it in front of you. I will not be like there. Symbol JavaScript. So this is like, I know how to say it in Spanish but not in English, so bear with me. Operator. So in here in the MDN, this is one of the many websites that you have that has all kind of resources. The Exponential. So if you want, for example, do like 2 exponent 2, for example, so like that will be like 2 exponent 2, and you get that. And if you do 2 exponent 3, for example, you get 8 and whatnot. So this is the symbol I wanted to show you. But the thing is, like, if you want to see any kind of other operators, meaning like the plus sign, this sign, or whatever, you can just go for expressions and operators in Google and you will get all of them. But I don't want to go super in deep in that because for now it's not super important. Okay, so we saw some of the symbols for numbers. We saw that also we can use it for words. Hello, world, there. And we get a concatenation of those strings, right? So we can also, for example, add a word and a number if we want. So for example, we can do something like the result is, and I don't know, like 20. Let's add a space in here. So you get a string that basically is the connection between the original string and a number. But this can get kind of trickier later, so you need to, like, if you start experimenting with this in the browser, you might find out, for example, that if you can, like, JavaScript will not give you an error if you do something like hello times 3, for example. It's like I'm trying to multiply a word and that should give you an error, but instead it returns this kind of weird value that is like none, like na Batman, or it's more like nan is an abbreviation. Like, programmers love to use abbreviation and they suck, but basically it's an abbreviation from not a number. Basically, I tried to multiply this hello by 3, and when it tried to do that, JavaScript find out that it wasn't a number, it was like an error or something like that. So instead of giving you an error, it returns this none value. Okay, so you might, every time you see a none in some operation you did, for example, this applies as well. If I do like 100 divided by 0, it doesn't this give you an infinity, but like you can get not a number. If you try to do some operation that is not valid, you might get this none. So I'm telling you this because infinity is kind of obvious. For example, if you get infinity or minus infinity as well, you can get like the negative infinity. Those are kind of easy to figure out because I see this word infinity and I know what that means. But if you are not like used to JavaScript and you see like this none thing, you might find out that like, what does this mean? So basically it means that something wrong happened. If you even Google it up, you will find like lots of errors in different applications, like even Facebook, Instagram, or something like that. Like, for example, like, I don't know, for the next birthday, there are like none days or something like that. So that's because someone in the Facebook team or the Twitter team or whatever messed something up, and you are seeing that none value instead of the actual number. So for now, we saw just like basic operations like adding, multiplying, dividing, and stuff like that with math, and also with strings. So numbers and strings, like hello, those are two of the like the basic types that come with JavaScript. When I say types, I'm saying basically the type of thing that you can use. So you can use numbers and you can use words called strings. You might also need some other types for other kinds of stuff. The other basic ones that come to mind right now is one that is called Boolean. This is super programming related, but this is basically like that type of value. It saves two types of things. Instead of saving, for example, a number that can go from -infinity to +infinity, or a string that could be any kind of word, emojis, Japanese characters, Chinese characters, or whatever, the Boolean values just save two values, true and false, basically. So those are the only values. So if I say, for example, true, I write the word true and I press enter, I get true again because true is a value. Is a value like 1, for example. 1 is a value of number, true is a value of Boolean, basically. This will come in handy later, but let's say, for example, like I mentioned before, this is not so math related. It's more like about logic. So something can be true or can be false. There are like white or black or white. There are no like middle grounds. If you need some kind of like gray, you need to use numbers. But if you want to have some logic that can be either true or false, then you use Booleans, basically. So we saw already the operators. We need to see something else. So far I kind of like cheated when I show you that you can do just like x equals something, because this x equals something is basically creating this variable in what is called the global or the public scope. That's super complex to explain right now, but this is basically what is called a bad practice in JavaScript. So any programming language like HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, they all have what is called good practices. So basically you can do things good or you can do them bad. It's like, I don't know, if let's say you need to wash the dishes, you can just like watch them thoroughly and be aware of where they are dirty and like clean them up, and like after that take like a rag and make them like stop being humid or whatever. But you can also do it badly and just like wash them a little, like put them below the water and just like leave them as they are. So you can do things like you should, like the best way possible, and you can do it like just like that, and they work, but they could break in the future. So JavaScript has some good practices and some bad practices, and that's because like you can do some messy stuff, and as I showed you previously, for example, you can do something like hello times 3, and instead of like breaking or giving you an error or something like that, JavaScript lets you get away with the stuff that you do wrong. So instead, like to fix that, you need to try to do things correctly in order to avoid things breaking in the future. I know this sounds like a lot of like gibberish, but it will make sense as we go on, okay? So for now, let's say like just doing a variable name like x, or even like hello and equaling to world, okay? Something like this is not a good practice because this value that we are saving in here is kind of exposed. Any user can change it later. So let's say, for example, that you are on like Twitter, for example, and they made the error, they made the mistake of saving this will never happen, right? But let's say like your password equals, I don't know, 1 2 3 4. If you have this password, please change it. So let's say they save it like this, right, in their code. Assume that Twitter did this. Later on, if you are like navigating the website and you open this, I can go ahead and type password in here and I will get the value. So this is exposed. Anyone can access it and anyone can change it. So I can even like save it and later hack it or whatever. So this is actually a bad practice because we are exposing the values we are saving to the entire world. Anyone can change it and access it. So one thing you can do to start avoiding this is to use a word in here before the word you used. This is kind of like, I sometimes express myself like shit, sorry. So, this let word I put in here, it was called a reserved word, okay, or a reserved keyword or whatever. So this basically is similar to when I wrote true, for example, or none or something like that. There are values that come with JavaScript. So when you write let, you are basically saying I will create a new variable in here, and this variable will be accessible just for the place I'm on, not for everyone, just for the place I'm currently on, okay? So if I do let hello world, this behaves pretty much the same, like I still have hello in here and I have a world or whatever, but because I use this first, it's not longer global, it's not longer public, it's just accessible for me right now, for this place, for the place I'm currently on, and that place currently is just the browser window, but in the future we will put it in a place that is super inaccessible, okay? So we need to try to, every time we need to create something and save it, for example, the result of an operation 2 plus 2, we need to get used to first use this let word, okay? So let is one of two words that you will be using to save values, and I know that might be confusing, but it will be clear soon enough. So because I saved this let operation as 2 plus 2, now I can do something like operation and get the 4 value, okay? But I can also now change the value to something else, like for example 8. And now the value of operation is 8 because I changed it. If you want to avoid that the value that you saved is changed by somebody else, then you have this other word that is called const instead. This const is an abbreviation of constant. So it's basically the value will be constant over time, okay? So if in here I do something like, again, const operation, and again I save it 2 plus 2 in here or whatever, like example, let's say, and we save this, then if I do operation, I can access the value, I can see it, but if I want to change it to something else like 8 again, I will get an error right now saying me that assignment to a constant variable. Basically I'm trying to set a value to something that I said previously that will not change like ever. So this is a good practice is to generally try to use const as much as possible, because you need to try to avoid that values change without you expecting it to change, okay? So from now on, when I create a variable that I will change in the future, you will see that I will write something like let, and this will change, and let's say like hello. So now this will change. I can assign a new value like pi, and that will work. And if I want to create something that will never change in the future, I can create it like const. This will not change, and in here is like fixed, let's say something like that. So now if I say this will not change, I forgot the name that I just wrote code, and this is like malicious code, I'm not able to do that, okay? So it's just a heads up. From now on, every time I create a variable, I will create it with either let or const. Let if I want to change it, const if I don't want to change it. And with time you will notice that I will be using more and more const and less let, but we will see that in the future. Okay, now everything is fine, everything is great. Like, okay, we have a way to doing like mathematical operations, and we have a way to creating long strings or long quotes by just adding up different strings and stuff like that. That's great. But the thing is, like, so far this is not super useful either, because we are just saving stuff, but we are not doing anything with it. So let's say, for example, one classic example, let's say, like for example, if you are able to drink or not. For example, let's say this is a website that is selling beer, and it first asks you what your age is, and based on that, it lets you enter or not. For example, it's super common example that you receive in like programming courses or whatever, but let's say that. So in that regard, we can, for example, save the current age of the user and like show like your age is whatever based on what we saw. But the thing is, like, we don't have any so far we didn't see any way or to like actually say the user like, yeah, you don't have enough like age in order to drink, for example. So to achieve that, instead of using what is called what I showed so far, that's called expressions, we need to start using what is called like control structures or statements. Those are basically a way of controlling the logic flow of our code. So in order to be more clear, let's write something. So let's say we have a const for now because it will not change, called name, and in here we have, let's say, Leo is in the chat, so Leo. Now we have a const age, and we will make you super young, let's say 17 years old, okay? So if I just press enter in here, I already saved like name, Leo, and age 17. So I can, for example, have something like hello plus name plus your age is plus age, okay? So hello, your age is 17. That's great, but the thing is, like, we are not filtering anything. It's not like if your age is something, then we do something. If not, then we do other thing, okay? So to achieve that, we need to start using what is called a control structure, one of many that are in programming languages in general and in JavaScript itself. So the one that we will be using, and I just said the name, but it's basically the same expression, is what is called an if for now. So if is basically a control structure. A control structure is used to, when the flow of the logic of your application, for example, first we say like, what's your name? And you say Leo. What's your age? 17. Okay, and now the flow of the programming so far was super linear because it was one thing after the other, right? But from now on, we take control over that flow, and we can go either to a path in which we say, okay, you are 17, so you can't drink, or we can go to a path where it says like, you are, I don't know, like you are 18 plus, so you can drink, or something like that. But we need to control the flow, the logic flow of our program. So in order to achieve that, we use this if control that basically in here we can do something like if the age of the person that we have. And in here we use another operator, so it's called equal. So in this is not super intuitive, so I have to explain it. In JavaScript, in order to say something is equal to something else, instead of just using one equal symbol, because this is already being used by, as I showed you before, like const something equals value, because we are already using the symbol to say when we want to assign a value, we can't use it again in here. So when we have equality, we need to use a triple equals. That sucks, but is the way it was done. So you might ask why aren't you using 2 equals, or why didn't we went with 2 equals? 2 equals is another operator that is actually also used for equality, but is, as I mentioned before, a bad practice, because when you use 2 equals, you have a lot of errors that you can avoid by just using 3 equals. I will go into that in deep in the future, but for now let's just say like equality is 3 equals. okay? So if age equals 3 equals, okay? And in here, let's say 17 for now. This is not the logic we want. We actually want like bigger than, but for now, let's say equals, okay? Equals 17, then, and now this is kind of similar to what we saw in CSS, but we need to use these curly brackets in order to say where something starts and where something begins. So far, if I actually wrote all the code we have so far, we have const name Leo, okay? After that, we have const age 17. And after that, we have this if. So this is linear because we got the name and the age, and then in here we need to create what is called a logic block, because whatever is inside this opening and closing curly brackets will only be run, or will only be seen by our code or whatever. It will only be run if the age is actually 17. So for example, in here, let's say I need to use something that I didn't show you yet, but I will explain it so far. Console log has 17, something like that, okay? So if I press enter, I see this message that says has 17. If, let's say, we have actually the value is 18, so it's not equal to 17, then we never see this has 17 message because it's not equal to 17. Like, stop me at, I must remind you, stop me at any time if this gets confusing, okay? Because I might get confusing. I do this like every day, and like you might like be the first time you see this, so just interrupt me, okay? So if age equals 17, I go and do this. This thing that I wrote in here is just a thing that comes with the browser and is used to show stuff in this console. So remember, we have the elements view that is used to show the elements on the website and the CSS, and we have this console view. So this is the console, okay? And if I write something like console.log, whatever I put in here will be shown in the console. So for example, if I say hello there, it will be shown like hello there, okay? It's just for output. I will go into deep in this as well. I needed to show you if first, and then I will go into this. So refresh. Okay. So we have name, we have age, and we have this if equals to 17 has 17. But the thing is, like, the logic we wanted is to if the age is lower than 18, let's say 18, you can drink, and if not, then you can't. So first we can change this equals to lower than, because in JavaScript is not the same as if in HTML, so this symbol is actually what it should mean, is lower than. So if the age is lower than 18, so for example 17, 16, 15 and so on and so forth, in here we can say something like you can't drink, okay? And now we could do one of two things. We could just like copy this and paste it in here and say like if it's bigger or equal to 18, you can drink, for example. But there is a better and easier way to do this when you have an if structure, and that's basically let's cut this and remove this. So if the age is lower than 18, then we say you can't drink, okay? Else, that's if something happens, then do this. Else, so if not, basically, and then again we open another block in here and we put the other logic in here. So this will be something like, let's me MS Paint Online. Is this the one I want? Yeah. So I will show it to you in Paint like a professional. So far we have the name Leo. So let's say that name and age. Okay, so does this work? Yeah. Name, and we have age in here, right? So this happened one thing after the other. So we have this and then this, right? I assigned Leo to name and age to 17. That's okay. But once we reach this point, this if point, we basically did something like this, where there is like some kind of logic in here based on the age. So let's put like in here age lower than 18, right? Something like that. So if the age is lower than 18, then we do something, and if not, then do other thing. Okay, so basically we have name Leo, age 17. If the age is lower than 18, then we say you can't drink, and else meaning the other way around, meaning if it's bigger or equal to 18, then you can drink. If we run this by pressing enter as always, you can see you can't drink because the age is 17, so it's lower than 18, and it goes in here. If instead we went to, for example, to 21 in here, then you see that you can drink, basically. So we went to the other branch of this logic because now it is like the logic is the inverse. So this in here was called one of many control structures or statements in JavaScript, and this is the if statement. So if something else, something else. Okay. We have like a lot. I don't think I will be covering them all. Like for example, we have some for repetition and stuff like that. So if we want to do one thing several times, we have a structure for that. But for now, what I want to do is try to let's try to start integrating this with the browser. Will be a good approach, just to keep seeing JavaScript. Yeah, I think we could just see a little bit more of JavaScript before integrating, because it's like we could go the path of just like start messing around with the website we have, this one in here, and just adding JavaScript to it directly. But the thing is like that requires a little bit more of complexity. I think like we should like focus like an entire stream just on that. And if you don't have like a lot of knowledge of the proper language itself, JavaScript itself, then start working with HTML and CSS is kind of messier and it's kind of harder. So I guess we could instead see a few more things of just JavaScript, just like JavaScript in here in the console. And then we can focus either at the end of this same stream, that if it doesn't become like a 4 or 5 hour stream, I will try to like put it in the end of this same stream, and if not, then I will switch it to the next one. We can do like JavaScript 2 or part 2 or whatever, and just like go ahead over that. So for now, let's just keep on doing JavaScript in here, and if we have more time, we will see some integration with CSS and HTML. So far then we saw constants, const and something like name, for example, and in here I will put look now. We saw what is called the variables let, so the things that can change. For example, let's put the age in here, and I'm an old man, so let age 13. So we saw the if structure that takes some logic in these parentheses. For example, age bigger than, like, I don't know, like lower than 21 or something like that. Inside of here we put what we want when that logic becomes true, and else in here we put what happens if that logic is not true, basically. So this is just one of many ways of controlling. So what else can I? Okay, I'm remembering things as I go on. So I mentioned at the beginning that, not so much at the beginning, but like starting up with this, that we have strings for saving words and characters and whatnot. We have numbers, and I also mentioned that we have something that was called Boolean. By the way, this is I show you in HTML that the way to adding comments to other developers was just doing this. This is a comment. So one of the two ways you have to create a comment in JavaScript is by doing like // and in here is the comment. So this will not be run by the browser. It's just like for me and for you, or if I, for example, share this code with someone else, it's for them to read, but it's not for the browser itself. So the type I talk about besides strings and numbers was Boolean, right? Boolean, as I mentioned, just take two values, true or false, okay? So if the if structure also only takes a Boolean in here, it doesn't look like it, but it's actually in here is taking a true or a false, basically. So I could say something like const in here and say is old enough, for example, okay? And instead of assigning a value like true directly to say, yeah, it's true, I don't know if he's or she is old enough, right? Or assigning a value like a number or something like that, in here I can just put a logic expression, okay? So this is basically like this expression will be evaluated. So first we save the name Luke, then we save the value age. Now age equals 30, okay? So now I reach this line of code and the browser will say like, okay, let's age is 30. 30 is not lower than 21. So this is false. Okay? How do I know this? I can just show you. I can do something like 30 lower than 21. And you can see that the browser is giving me a false value in here. And if I say, for example, 30 is bigger than 21, I get true because that's a true value. So going back to the code, if I have, okay, the name Luke and the age 30. So if is the value of is old enough will be the return value of this expression. I know it's getting kind of confusing because I'm trying to use the same words again and again until they stick up. But this logic expression is telling me age should be lower than 21. Because if not, it's not, because 30 is bigger, then the value that we end up having is gold enough is false. So we can replace this with this. So we can just say like, if is old enough, we do something in here, something, and else we do something else. You might wonder what happens if I just run this code, because for now, as I mentioned before, this is just comments, so these are not read by the browser, they are just there for us as developers. So if I run this, we don't get anything, we get this undefined thing that basically means like empty, let's say. So because I didn't run anything in here, so I can just change this to be again like that thing I showed you before, console log thing, and in here the thing I want to show, so yup, is old enough. And in here we can do something like console log again. Why I got more spaces on this one, it's kind of unaligned. So in here, and we can do something like nope is not old enough. Okay, so now if I run this, I get nope is not good on old enough. And why is that? Is old, okay, that makes sense. So I got a result that I wasn't expecting, right? So let's use this my mistake as an opportunity to show you how to debug, so how to figure out what's wrong with my code. Okay, so I'm saying if it's old enough, I should say yep, it's good old enough, and if not, then no, it's not old enough. But I'm getting it's not old enough when it's 30, right? That's because the expression I used in here is giving me a result that I'm not expecting, basically. So I want is old enough to be true if the person is old enough and false if it's not old enough. So this logic should be inverted to be like this, to be bigger than 21. So if the age is bigger than 21, then it's old enough. This is the mistake I made, just this operation in here. So now if I run this again, yep, it's old enough. It's old enough, it's true, so I go into here. I show you this for two reasons. First, I wanted to show you that you can save logic expressions. It's not that you need to use them directly into, for example, an if. You can save them into a value. And also to make you conscious that it's not that you need to put a logic expression in here in an if. You are not it's not mandatory to do that. You can just pass in here a Boolean value like true or false, and if it's true, then it will go in here, and if it's false, then it will go to the else branch. So if true, do this, else do that, basically. Okay? We have logic expressions, we have numbers, we have booleans, we have strings. One thing that could be useful, I show you like this in HTML, I showed you this in CSS as well, but I wasn't like super clear about it, so I want to show you like a little bit about it. So you might notice that I usually like this arrow in here, this empty space in here is actually like a tab space, like when you press the tab key on your keyboard. So every time I press a tab, you basically get this spacing, right? Sorry, read in the chat a minute. It's better to call the constants because they can't change. Yep, indeed. So in the chat, Leo asks if it's better to use constants as values because they will not change, and the answer is generally yes. You should try to avoid changes as much as possible. That's like the best thing you could do. This will be clearer in the future because as we progress into like frameworks and libraries and stuff like that, when we go, for example, into React or into Vue, you will notice that every time we have something that can change, like a let, that can introduce like a lot of bugs and problems because basically the value of that is unpredictable. It's like maybe it's the value I set for it, like for example 30, but maybe somebody else, like a coworker even, or something, or maybe you yourself change the value in a place that you weren't aware of. So later on that value is not what you are expecting, it's something else. So generally it's better to try to avoid change in general, just like try to save values and use those values directly. So going back to the tabulation that I was mentioning, basically you create white space by just pressing the tab. There is people that use spaces instead. I just prefer to just do one keystroke and press tab and create tab spacing. But the thing is, like, this is not like, if you don't use tabs at all, the code still works. So if, for example, I go ahead and do something like this will work. This still works. The browser will read it and will work. But the problem with this is that it's super hard to read for us humans, and this is going back to what Gonzalo mentioned at the beginning of the stream today, that basically we need to think about variables and stuff like the spacing I'm using, not because of the computer, but because of humans like yourself and others. And you might think like, yeah, but I wrote this, so I know what I'm doing and I don't need all these tabs or all these names because I know that, I don't know, for example, I saved a name in an X variable. Yeah, you know that now, but in a few months, if you like leave this code without even touching it and a few months you go back to it, you will not remember it, I can assure you. So it's better to just use names that are readable for humans and code that it has spaces that are readable for humans as well. The general convention that you will see either in HTML, in CSS, and in here in JavaScript as well is that you generally create like a tab space or an indentation level is called. So basically going like 1, 2, 3 or 4 tabs deep. The general convention is to tab things that are inside another thing. So in here, all these things are at the same level. So I don't need to do like a tab in here because let is not inside name, it's at the same level that name. So I leave it as it is. But for example, this console log thing that I use in here is inside the block if in here. So this if block in here. So because it's inside of that, I use a tab in here and in here. So basically like letting me visually recognize that one thing is inside another thing, basically. This will work still if I write it like this. But as soon as I do this, it's not clear any longer what thing is inside what, right? It's like, okay, so if, okay, so here is an open bracket, so I need to look for the closing one. So everything between those is like, it's not super visual. So if I just go ahead and create like a tab in here, now it's super obvious. It's like this is inside this block in here and this is inside this block in here, okay? So one other thing I should show you from the syntax of JavaScript before going to functions. That is the thing that I want to show you lately today. So one other thing is, you might notice that I started using these semicolons in some places. In here I forgot to use them, but yeah. So semicolons are used by pretty much any decent programming language, and they are used to separate one thing from the other, basically. So I know that in here, for example, I have like a new line in here, right? So there is like const name look, new line, like when you press enter, let age 30. So visually they are separated. From the code's perspective, like from the perspective of the browser, as I'll show you before, you can write stuff like without using tabs or spaces or stuff like that. So this could theoretically be written like this and the browser will still work. So I can just like show you that if I run this, this still works even if I put everything in the same line, okay? The thing is, if I remove that semicolon, the browser could get confused. It will not happen every time, but there are some places where the browser will not know where the const name look starts and when the late age 30 starts. So in order to avoid that, you need to, every time you finish an expression like this assignment expression or for example this one or stuff like that, you need to use this semicolon in order to basically say to the browser like this is what this thing is finishing, like this is the closing part of this thing. You might wonder, for example, why there isn't any semicolons in here at the end of the if, and that's because this is, as I said before, it's not an expression per se. An if is a control block or a statement, and statements in general don't have a semicolon, don't need a semicolon, because even if we write everything in one line, like if something here, and we open and close, else open and close, okay? Even if we write everything in one line and then we have like a const hello value in here. Everything in here is in one line, right? But the thing is, like, for an expression, that is super clear because it begins where the reserved word is. So in this case, as soon as the browser sees if, it knows that in there is starting an if. Then the block starts and closes by these curly brackets, so it doesn't need any kind of like semicolon in here because it already knows, like in here, because it already knows that it's closing as soon as it sees this closing symbol, okay? So that's why stuff that doesn't, basically, like, it's not a general rule, but let's say like the general rule will be, if it has a block, like for example an if that has this opening and closing bracket, you can just omit the semicolon. But if not, like for example in an assignation, then you need a semicolon in order to separate one thing from the other, so the like the browser understand where one thing begins and when the others ends, and so on. So one last thing that I wanted to show you today is a little more complex, but still as one of the the most useful things about JavaScript and like programming languages in general, and that's what is called basically like avoiding repetition. So basically we use computers and we use programs to avoid doing stuff that will be like it will be harder to do by ourselves, right? So in order to achieve that, programming languages provide different mechanisms in order to avoid repetition and to have behaviors encapsulated. So basically it's like, let's say if you have a way, you don't have a way, right? In the the actual real world. But let's say, like, using the same example I used previously, if you have a way to actually saving how you wash the dishes. So if you wash the dishes super carefully, but if you were able to do that once and save the way you did it, and every time you need to wash the dishes, just like repeat that without having to do it yourself, you will do that. In programming, basically, you are able to do that. You are able to take a behavior or an action, save it in a place, and every time you need to repeat that, you just use it again, okay? So far, let's go to the pretty much the beginning. Const, let's make all const. We have strings to save words. So let's say words in here. Okay. We have numbers to save values, numeric numbers like 100, for example. Okay. And we have, as I showed you before, booleans that are basically there to save true or false values. So this is like logic expressions. You can just go say true, you can just say false, or you can put an expression in here, like for example, I don't know, 2 is lower than 1, for example. So 2 is lower than 1, no, so this will be false, basically. You can basically save words, numbers, and you can save logic expressions, or just like the output of that logic expression. So true, false. One other thing you have in here is what's called a const func. Let's say. I will just write it first, and then I will explain it. So. Let's say number 1, number 2, number 1 plus number 2. Yay, let's say something like that. So you have a way of saving behaviors. Basically, the name for that is function. So the actual name for this is function. The general idea comes from mathematics. So the mathematical functions, like I don't know, like Pythagoras or whatever. But the actual functions in JavaScript are used to encapsulate to save behaviors or actions, not to actually save like mathematical operations. So in here I'm using a mathematical operation like an example, but it doesn't mean that you need to actually do this, okay? So this that I'm doing in here is basically saying I want to save this number 1 plus number 2 behavior, okay? Let's make it wider so it's clearer. There. So this number 1 plus number 2 behavior, I want to save that operation, but this number 1 and number 2, I still don't know what the values of those will be. I don't have them like in here a const number 1 and const number 2 or anything like that. Let's just get rid of those for now, just focus in the function. So we have this number 1 and number 2, but we don't have any constants or anything to know those values. So that's why we have this in here. This in here is basically like saying I will at some point have this number 1, I will at some point, I still don't have them, have this number 2, and as soon as I have those two values, I want you to, so this is like this kind of arrow made by the equal sign and the bigger than sign, but this fat arrow, and then I want you to give me this result. So as soon as I have these two values, I want to have this result, okay? So the way to use this, let's have a proper name in here. So let's say like add numbers. So when I want to actually use it, I just do add numbers, and similar to that console.log I show you with the parenthesis and whatnot, that was a function basically. So we are creating a function of our own right now. So we do add numbers, and now in here in parentheses I said what are the values of these two. So let's say I want to do 2 plus 2, I just say like 2, and that will be the value for number 1 because it's the first one with the first one, right? And the value for number 2, so let's do comma, number 2 will be another 2, okay? So this is this, and this is this, okay? So if I call this, if I write this, basically I will get the 4, right? This looks super complex. Why didn't I wrote just like 2 plus 2, right? Because now every time I need to do an operation like this one, like number plus number, I don't need to write 2 plus 2 any longer. I just do like add numbers, and now I do 3, 1, and I get 4 again, or 3, 5, let's say, 8 and whatnot. So I took this behavior of adding up two numbers, and basically I saved that behavior, that action of adding two numbers, to this add numbers constant. So every time I set the name of that constant and I set the values for number 1 and number 2, so for example in this case number 1 is 3 and number 2 is 5, I get the result number 1 plus number 2, so I get 8 in this case, 3 plus 5, okay? This is useful for any kind of stuff. So for example, let's say I can do something like greet, that will be like, hey, greetings. So we can do something like name in here. Let's put it into parentheses for now. And in here I can do something like hi there, comma, and in here I can do plus name plus exclamation mark or something like that, okay? I save this, and now every time I want to greet somebody, I can do something like greet, and in here I can put Leo, I can put Flor, I can put Gonzalo, and every time I get the hi there, and I had to write this just once, and every time I need to greet somebody, I just do greet and name, and I get the entire string, okay? So this is when programming starts to becoming like easier, because every time we have something complex, we just put it inside a function, and every time you need to do that again, we just call that function. At the beginning, I mentioned, for example, that even if the popular belief says that you need to have some kind of knowledge about mathematics in order to do programming, that's not actually true. And I mentioned the example of gravity. So let's, for example, say, I will not do it right now, but you could have a constant that is called gravity and takes only the values of the weight, for example, or the mass of the thing that is falling, and it gives you the time that it will take in order to actually hit the floor, for example, or something like that. But the thing is, like, you don't need to do that operation once and once again. You just Google it once, put it inside a function, and use the function, forgetting about the content. So as soon as I did that, I can now like clear the console. I'm clearing the console constantly without showing you how, but it's basically like you can press Ctrl L or this cross over here. So that's still saved. So every time I need to greet somebody, I already forgot how the code inside that function looks like, but I still can do like greet and put anything in here, like whatever. Look, I will greet myself, and like I get this output without even knowing what's happening inside greet. So I now can forget that, and the weight of like all the things that I need to know at this time is reduced, because I don't need to think about, okay, I need to add header before look. No, it's like just greet look, and that function is taking care of that for me. Okay. Now, this is kind of recent, but I want to show you still. So far, I show you the example with this greet function, and like with every time I need to add some strings, I do this string plus something plus, and it's kind of like super long, right? So there is a better way for doing this nowadays, like with the latest versions of JavaScript. So let's do like const greet. I will write exactly the same just below in order to show you name, and we can in here, instead of using this quote mark, we use this one. It's generally like in the right side of the keyboard, depending if you have like a Spanish or an English keyboard, but it's generally like around the enter button or on the right. It's just lying around there, but yeah, this character in here. So you can just do like header, I will write name for now, but I will show you how, and exclamation mark. And in order to tell JavaScript that I don't want to actually see, like, let's refresh and show you. If I do this will not work because greet Leo, I'm getting name directly. I want to have the value of name, not the word name, okay? So in order to achieve that, we change this to be like this: $, opening bracket, and closing brackets. So when you write this, basically everything that is between the brackets followed by that follow a $. So everything that is in here will be evaluated like just JavaScript. I could put just like 2 + 2 in here, and I will get like header 4, for example. But instead of doing that, I put name in here, and this is far better than doing all this jargon of like plus whatever. I just put like header name, and it's like far easier to read, okay? This is more recent. That's I wanted to show you first that you can add strings, but this is like the best way of actually putting some value inside of a string. So if I save this and use greet folks, it's like hi there folks. And as you can see, the good thing about abstracting this functionality or this action into a function is that now I can change how header is working internally. But for the people that is using the greet, let's say I'm in a team and there are team members that are using my greet function already, I changed how it works internally, but for them externally it works exactly the same. So if I didn't abstracted this behavior into a function first, then if I wanted to make this change, I will have to go on my entire code, like go in every place where I greet somebody and change it to be like this. But because I moved the behavior to just the greet function, I just change it in here and it's changed for everyone basically. So we have like a lot of benefits when it comes to abstracting behaviors into functions. Basically, when we optimize something or where we improve something, or for example, let's say it has a bug, so it has like a problem and we fix that problem, we don't need to fix it in every place when it was used. We just fix it in one place and it will fix everywhere. So that will be like the equivalent in real life. We don't have an actual equivalent, but let's say like if we live like in a magical world, it will be like if you buy a car and that car has like a problem with the windshield or something like that, the people at the company of that car could fix the windshield on the original car and it will be fixed on every windshield of every car owner. So that's like magic, but that's actually how that behaves on software. So it's like, this is like actually like a really good practice to try to abstract as much as possible in order to avoid repetition. So you don't need to write it every time, you just write it once and use it in every place, and you fix it in one place and you fix it everywhere basically. So one last maybe optimization we could do to this same greet thing will be that JavaScript allows you to, when you have only one parameter, I never told you that, I should. So let's go to this one. And let's put the greet just below that. So these two functions are basically, these are called the variables that I still don't know the value of, the ones that I'm expecting. These variables are called parameters. I don't know why they decided to call them differently when they are actually like future variables, let's say, but they are called parameters. So this number 1 and number 2 are the two parameters of the add numbers function, okay? And this is the body of that function, the actual body, okay, the body of that function. When you have a function as short as this one, as greet, that only takes one parameter, so this one has two parameters and this one has one, right? So if you have only one, you just can omit the parenthesis as well. This is kind of confusing at first, but it's kind of like sweeter. I don't know, like the syntax is super sweet. So basically greet takes a name and it gives you a header name. So if we forget about this and just see this line of code, it's kind of clear. It's like we have a const greet, which takes a name and returns a header name, okay? This is like the simplest expression of a function. Now we should see like how this looks if we have like something more complex, right? So let's say yeah, const times 2, and let's say we have a function that is called times 2 and takes a value. We could just do value and do value times 2 and just return that, okay? But let's say that we want to do like that console log thing to show some value first and then give this value to the person using the times 2 function, okay? So to achieve that, we need to get more complex. Instead of just putting the resulting value, the output in here, the body of the function turns to use the curly braces, similar to what let's say the if block looks like, or like a block in CSS, for example. So we need to use the opening and closing bracket. And in here we can do something like, for example, const result value 2, okay? So inside these brackets, similar to an if, you can do anything that you can do outside the bracket. So in here I could, for example, if I needed to, I don't, but let's say I needed to, I can create another const func in here, another function that does something, or if I need a logical expression, I can do a logical expression or whatever. But as I said, what I want to do in here is to do a console log of something. So let's say, for example, the input value is, and in here I can do value, and the output is, and in here again $, curly brackets, result. Okay, now if I call times2 and I send a 4, for example, and I call this function, so enter, I get the input value is 4 and the output is 8. That's great, amazing. So now let's say I want to save that 8, right? Because I want to save the result. I can just do const set let's say output, for example, or something like that, and times2 4 in here, right? So I will expect that after showing this, the input value is 4 and the output is 8, this output constant I created in here will have the output of my function, right? So if I do output, I get undefined. And why is that, right? So I mentioned before that undefined is basically like in JavaScript, it will be like saying empty. It's like the empty value. It's like, I don't know what it is. It's undefined, okay? But that's why is that, right? So if we check our function again, we see that we have this result in here, and we do value +2, and we do a console log that shows everything. But the thing is, like, this result is not being saved in any place. It's just in here in this result constant in here. But as soon as the function finished running, so as soon as I did this, the input value is value and the output is result, this result is actually deleted. It stops existing basically. So how can we avoid that? How can we make this result being saved in order to get it in this output when we do const output times to whatever? So in order to achieve that, we need to change the const. So we go again to this function, and in here we need to use a word that is called return result. This basically means that when we do times2 and take a value, we create the constant result, we do value plus times2, we log that, and then we return the result. Returning basically is giving that to the outside world. So when you don't write return something, like for example return result, like in here, so in here I'm returning the value that is saved in here. If I don't write this, it's exactly the same as doing is like doing return undefined. That's why when I try to access the output value, it was undefined, because I never said what this times2 thing is giving to the outside world. So if I write return result and save this for now, there, return result, okay, and I do times2 4 and again const output, because I want to save that for later. I run this and I get the input value like exactly the same as before, but if I try to get the value of output, I now get 8 instead of undefined, because as soon as I calculated the result, that as you can see in here, it was calculated as 8, it was returned. So in order to make it as clear as possible, I will show you a side-by-side between a block function and an arrow function, a simple arrow function. So we have const, let's say sample, takes a value, and let's say it returns value times 2, okay? This will be like the simplest form we have for a function. And the complex one, the most complex one we can write is const complex, let's say. We can put the value in parentheses, it's not needed, but we can. And then we use this block, and in here return value times 2. So these two functions, simple and complex, both of them do exactly the same thing. So if we save this and do simple 2, we get 4, and if we do complex 2, we get 4. They both get the same result because they are doing the same thing, but this is like the longest way of expressing it, like the longer format of the function, and this is the short format, okay? This long format is usually needed if you need to do some kind of thing before returning the value. Like, for example, like we did before, for example, we wanted to log then return the value or something like that. If you want to do something before returning the value, or for example, you want to do several different operations before return the value or whatever, you use this form of function because you need a block, you need several things to happen. But when you have to do something more simple, like just take a value and return an operation or a string or something like that, you just do it like this, like in a line. Generally, and I will say this now and I will show it again and again in the future, it's generally better to try to have your functions as simple as possible. There is a principle in programming in general that is called KISS, like KISS. And it's not because of the chef kiss, it's because it's like keep it simple stupid. So it's like keep it as simple as possible and super stupid, like keep it simple, okay? So if you write functions like this instead of like this, when you just need the value times 2, you are not just, it's beyond like writing a lot, it's not the thing with writing a lot, but this is far simpler to read. It's just like value plus times 2, okay, it's like simple. And this is like value, okay, so now it's a, so this is a block and then return value, oh, okay, it's the returning, okay. So it's like this more to read. It's not so much about writing less, it's more about like reading less, having to read less in order to understand what you are trying to do. So I will generally favor, and I will show you, like every time I show you some code, even in frameworks or libraries or whatever, I will try to favor this over this because I favor simplicity over complexity. So I try to keep it as simple as possible. The other thing, like I always mention two principles that I use a lot in programming. One is KISS, like keep it simple stupid, and the other one is dry, like keep it dry. And dry is like is basically DRY, and that's don't repeat yourself. So I will try to put as much stuff in functions as possible because I want to avoid having to repeat myself to do stuff twice when I can put it in one function and do it and use that function once and once again. So yeah, I don't know if I'm forgetting something for like a kind of an intro. I have like, I show you consts, I show you let, I show you functions. Yeah, I'm intentionally trying to avoid showing some old stuff because generally you can't avoid using old stuff nowadays, even if you need to like write something for Internet Explorer or something like that, like some really old browser. Even if you need to write code for those, you can still get away writing stuff with modern practices, with the latest and greatest, because there are a lot of tools out there in the wild that you can like take your new code and convert it into something old if you need to. But I will, like the vast majority of examples I will be showing you are for kind of new stuff, because that's the stuff that I will be using and I will like compel you to use. But just for the sakes of it, just so I can like show you, like I can set that I show you the old stuff. I show you let for variables. Hello. And I show you constants for constants. This will not change. There is another one that is pretty old and I will not recommend you to use it anywhere, so I will just show you, but let's just keep it in this stream in this moment, and you promise you will never use it and I will never use it as well, and that's called var. This is old variable. Is old. Do not use this. So the var is pretty much the same as let, but worse. So if you use a var instead of a let, you are basically doing like the bad version of let. Let's just keep it at that. I mean, it has to do with some stuff that we will be seeing in the future called basically scope. If you need to know, it's basically like I showed you before, like you have if and some logic in here, and this is if it's true, if true, and else if false. Okay, so I can inside of this block write something like let name whatever. So if logic is true, then we will create this name whatever, and maybe I don't know, like console log name or whatever. I don't know. Okay. So, but the good thing about let is that let will create this variable, and this variable will only exist inside this block. What that means is if I try to access name outside, like in here I try to do like console log name, I will get an error because let doesn't exist out here. It only exists inside this block. Okay? And that, believe me, that's good. That's what you want. If we use a var instead in here, that's like an old practice that I don't recommend at all, then var automatically is the same as creating it out here. It's like doing this. It's exactly the same. So var creates a variable, but that variable doesn't exist only in this block, exists for everyone, and that, as I mentioned before, is not good at all. That is not what you want. So just for the sake of completitude or whatever, I show you the var, but for us as a web developer and like from now on, we will never use var. You should never use var. You should use let and const. Const is the ideal one. If you really need to change the value of that thing, then use a let, but let and const, and those are the only ones that you should be using. Seriously. So the other thing I didn't show you is that we can write a function like const, I don't know, like let's go to one of the old examples like add 2, and this is a value, and we say value plus 2, okay? So we added 2 to whatever value we get, and that's a function. You can also write this same function in an even more complex way than the one that I show you, but the two that I show you are the preferred ones, and you should try to avoid this one as well. And this is function. Instead of using like const or let or whatever, all the things that we are used to, we write the word function, and then we do add 2, and then we need to use parentheses, and in here goes the value, and then we need to use curly brackets even if you only have one value to return, and then you need to use return. There is like super mandatory. And then you have to do value plus 2. I think my camera froze. Yeah. Okay. Camera is dead. Whatever. We can turn it off. Source camera. Goodbye. So as I was showing you, we have this add to value, and this one and the one above it, so up to old, let's put it as a name so we don't have the same name for the both of them. These two functions, again, they do the same, but what would you rather to write, right? We want to keep it simple. We want to keep it as to keep this concept of saving stuff, like in constants of inlet or whatever. So instead of writing add to value that returns this, you will really write all this garbage. It's like this was the original way. Okay, so this is like kind of new. It has like 2 years or so, maybe more. But this is kind of new, this arrow function format, and this is like the old way of writing JavaScript. So I would not recommend to use this one. I just wanted to show you in order to like, to show everything at the beginning, but it's like still, I will, from now on, every time I write a function, I will write it with this format. So you can just target using to it. Okay, how much time did I spend already with this? Do I have like a count? Yeah, 2 hours already? Okay, I am guessing for now we are kind of okay. We saw constants, we saw the if structure, we saw functions, and we saw let, and we saw some of the old stuff. I guess I could show you one last thing about logic with like this new kind of format with arrow functions, and we could be done for today. But for sure, like the next Sunday, I think I will be going to like a JavaScript part 2. And that one will be focused on like integrating all the things we saw today with the HTML and the CSS we already learned on previous videos. So let's go with this last one thing. So I show you that we can do pretty much everything with just like const, a name that you want, and in here you can put either like booleans, like true or false. You can put numbers, you can put strings that have this format with the double quote, or you can use this backtick thing and do like hello and have a variable in here. Variable, I can write today, hello variable or whatever. And I show you that you can also put like functions in here. So for example, like value and value times 2. What I didn't show you is that you can also abstract stuff like the if into a value as well. So instead of having to write something like if logic do something else, do something else, instead of writing all this, we can abstract this into a function with a ternary operator. And that's like it's me flexing with terminology, but I can actually show you. So let's say for example we want to have that function that we saw at the beginning, like not the function but the logic we saw at the beginning, to filter by age if somebody is able to drink or not. So we can do something like this: const can drink alcohol, beer, let's put shorter, beer, can drink beer. Okay, this will be a function that will take the age of the person, and it should, like, let's do it first like with an if. It should return if the user can drink or not. So we can do what follows: if age is bigger than 21, we can then return true, because yeah, he is able to drink. Else we can return false. Okay, this is we are writing a lot for something that needs a lot less logic, right? So First off, every time you need to do something like if logic return true, else return false, you can just turn all this block into just doing return age bigger than 21 and get rid of all this, because it's like I'm basically telling like return age bigger than 21. This will already return a value boolean, so a boolean value. So age bigger than 21, if yes, then it will be true, if not, then it will be false. So this is already taking care of that. And I showed you previously that you can just remove the block when and the return and everything, and just have this age bigger than 21, and that will be like, I can just go ahead and use this like can drink beer, and let's say like 30 is true, I can drink beer. If I'm 19 is false because I can't drink beer. Okay, now the ternary operator, that I mentioned before, is useful not when you need to return a boolean, but actually when you need to return different, like maybe a string value or something like that, and I can be clearer with that. So let's say now I can use this same function again, so can drink beer, but now I will create another one that can const can drink beer, and let's say like message. This is a super long name, but let's keep it that way. I didn't mention this, but yeah, for variable names or constant names, it might be kind of obvious already, but you can't use spaces. So this is, if I do a spacing here, it will break. So that's why I write using this programming convention that is called camel case. So it's like a camel, because every time you hit a new word, you use an uppercase. So can drink beer message. So this is just a convention, but yes, because I can do this. So I need to actually use an uppercase, but yeah. So const can drink beer message. So this again will take age, and because I have this can drink beer function, I can just use that. So say can drink beer age. So for now I have this can drink beer age bigger than 21. So this will return either true or false if the user, let's say the user is able to drink, right? Or the age is bigger of 21. And then we have this can drink beer message that basically also takes an age and calls this can drink beer age. So if I just leave it like this, this will also just, is the same as just calling can drink beer. So it will be just true or false, but I want to actually create a message. So to achieve that, I do, this is when it gets tricky, question mark, and in here I put something like can drink colon can't drink. Okay, so this basically means I have this function can drink beer message. Okay, takes a age value, then it returns. So this is the whatever follows this fat arrow will be the return value, and then I call this other function. So I'm using the one that is just above it, can drink beer age. So for example, let's say I call this with 19, right? So the value 19 will be set to age, and I will set that same 19 in here. From here, it will get in here. This will return false because 19 is lower than 21. And from here, this question mark basically means whatever follows will be the value if it's true, and whatever follows this colon will be the value if it's false. So let's put it in a new line. This will be similar to do if can drink beer, return can drink else, oh, I pressed enter accidentally, lol. Else, there, return can't drink. So let's, even if I had to like super zoom it out a little bit, there. So instead of writing all this that is super long, if can drink beer 8, calling this function, and then I get true or false. If I get true, return can drink, what is that G in there? Else return it. Instead of doing all this, I just call the function, and whatever follows the question mark is for true, and whatever follows the colon is for false. So how does this work? I can just call it and do can drink beer message, and in here I say like 19 can drink. Okay, 21 can drink because it's equal, it's not bigger to 21. Okay, 22 can drink, awesome. 30 can drink, and so on and so forth. So yeah, I just wanted to, like, for today, just show you that even if statements can be expressed simply by just using a question mark and a colon. And yeah, you might think that, yeah, but this is just the return. Maybe I want to do like a lot inside of the if block or the else block. But generally that means that you are putting like a lot of complexity in something that could be simpler. So when you force yourself to write stuff in the simple, in these simple structures, you also force yourself to write better code at the end. So yeah, I think like for today that's good enough. What else can I do today besides, maybe, yeah, I will show you one last thing. This is not so much related with JavaScript, it's more related to CSS, and with this I will be closing today because there are like 2 hours and like a few minutes already, so I don't want to like drag you any longer. So working with CSS, I forgot to mention that there are some games that you can find on Google that are super fun and that are great to learn some stuff about CSS. The first one that I forgot to mention is CSS Frogger, I think it is, so Froggy, or yeah, this one. So this one, Flexbox Froggy is called, so you can Google it up. I will try to add it to the description of the video once I upload it to YouTube. So this one is made to teach you about the Flexbox. That's one of the things that I used in order to have this centered in the middle. So this website is like a game in which you need to put this frog up in this lift, and it has like a lot of different levels, and you need to put them in several different orders and different logics, and this teaches you about like layout in general with Flex. You also have, for something that is a little bit modern, more modern than Flex, that is called Grid. You have the Grid Garden CSS. This one is called the Grid Garden, is by the same creators, as you might notice by the design. And this one is made to actually learn about the grid system. That's a little bit more modern than Flex, but you can use either of those for like any kind of layouts. But yeah, what I mean is like, you don't need to only look for like tutorials like mine, or like documentation like the Mozilla Developer Network or something like that. You can also look for games or stuff like that are super like fun to play, and you end up like learning more by having a little bit of fun. Also, one favorite of Hannah, right on Hannah in here, is let me look for it. It's like, I think it was like Flexbox Zombies, I think it is. Yeah. So this one is free. You need to create an account for this one, but this is also super fun. It's similar to the Froggy one, is to learn about Flexbox, but you are actually like a guy with like a bow fighting like a zombies, so you need to use flexbox in order to defend yourself. So it's kind of fun, and at the same time you end up like learning about CSS layout. So yeah, I super recommend it as well. But yeah, I forgot to mention that in the CSS episode, and I wanted to show it today. I guess my camera is still kind of like is frozen. Yeah, look at me. I'm talking. I'm like a ventriloquist. I can talk without moving. Yeah. So I guess we can skip that and go directly to the closing. Again, as always, thank you a lot for your time and for watching, folks. As always, I just want to remind you that I'm doing this mainly to like have a place where I can just like put all my like general like knowledge about web development or whatnot in just a few videos, in order to don't have to explain this again and again. I explained this like in one of the first episodes, but still like I really enjoy like sharing this with you, and like the general company and the messages I receive in general, and the super positive feedback. So yeah, thank you a lot, and like I will see you next Sunday, I guess. So see ya.